This is Viticulture, where we share conversations with makers, growers, thinkers, and doers, folks who cultivate a good life. My name is Chris Missick, and I'm a lawyer turned winemaker in the Finger Lakes region of New York State, and I'm sitting down with great people in wine and other walks of life to hear their stories, learn their lessons, and take their advice on the perfect pairing. I hope you've been enjoying our new segment with Season 2, Wine Reads, where we highlight a topic and a thought piece that I've been mulling over. If you're a writer, feel free to share any pieces with me for consideration for this segment. For this episode, I wanted to share something a little more personal to our winery, Missick Cellars. I also wanted to take a step away from highlighting winery owners or winemakers and feature the type of hardworking individual that helps us get our mission done. Today, I'm sharing an interview with Matt Butts, my own cellar assistant. This was recorded as we were preparing to launch the podcast and was actually the first interview we completed shortly after setting up the studio. If you're someone interested in getting into the wine industry, Matt's insights give a glimpse into one of the paths you can take in your own life. Matt wanted to be a winemaker, found a way into the wine industry, and took the steps necessary to accomplish his goals. One other note, this was recorded before Harvest 2021. In the intervening months, Matt has had a chance to work the vineyard, spend late nights on the crush pad, get his feet wet in filtration and winemaking. He's doing a great job, too. If you like this podcast, please be sure to rate us 5 stars in Apple Podcasts and like our videos on YouTube. It really helps with the ratings and in introducing new folks to the show. Don't forget to visit our website at viticulturepodcast.com, and please subscribe to our Substack, where you'll get show notes, transcripts, musings, and exclusive offers. We increasingly center our content around Substack's distribution channel, and subscribers will have the chance to hear some exclusive podcasts delivered right to your inbox. You can also support the show at Substack and help us keep producing high-quality, in-depth content with makers and producers of all sorts. And though I'm not the best with social media, please check us out on all the major social media platforms. Additionally, if you or a maker you know is interested in being on the show in the future, drop us a line at viticulturepodcast@gmail.com. And now, here's the show. So today I have Matt Butts, and if you've ever been to the winery, you've seen Matt. He's worked the tasting rooms, he's plowed the driveways, and now he's making wine right next to me. So thank you, Matt. I really appreciate you coming by here today to tell your story, to talk a little bit about wine, what you like, your thoughts, what you hope to see out of the future. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on.
And I have to add that if it wasn't for Matt, we wouldn't have been able to get this studio built. This was a ladies' locker room at our north location in Geneva. And just 2 weeks ago, it was stacked with lockers and tables and years, even before we had the property of papers. It was a mess. But I think we've worked some magic the way we do with the grapes here in the Finger Lakes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we could barely move around in here. It's pretty exciting to see the evolution of this room, the development.
It is. I want to know more about you, Matt. What's your background?
Well, I was born in Ithaca, New York specifically, but I was raised in Rhode Island, there with my mother and my 2 sisters and my twin brother. I grew up there and went through high school in South Kingstown, Rhode Island, and Coventry, Rhode Island. I really didn't pay attention in high school at all. It was kind of like my party time. Mm-hmm. And from there, right after high school, I had then decided, you know what, I don't need college. I'm going to go right into the job force. And I worked at Electric Boat General Dynamics for years. I worked on the nuclear bulkheads for the subs for the U.S. Navy. And then from there, went to a wastewater treatment plant, worked in a bunch of different manufacturing and welding fields. I was good at it. I just absolutely hated it. I was miserable. And I decided, I woke up just one day and said, you know what? I think I got to fix this, So I kind of decided, you know what? It's time to go. And I sold the house, and I wound up moving to upstate New York after a pretty messy divorce. And
as they often are.
Oh, then you know what? If there's anybody that actually went through divorce and it was great, let me know how that actually happened. But so I moved up to upstate New York where my family was, and I've never been without a job for more than a week or 2 weeks in my life. So, the biggest thing in the Finger Lakes, specifically the Ovid area, is wineries.
Yeah.
So when I came here, I applied to a few different wineries, and then Wagner Vineyards called me up and said, hey, do you want a job in the tasting room? I was like, yeah, why not? I'm kind of going through a little bit of a party stage, and I need a little bit of cash flow. And so I started off at the tasting room and just kind of went down this rabbit hole,
Wagner has an interesting history. I mean, they were one of the early ones. I've been fortunate enough to taste a 1981 Riesling from Wagner, and I'll tell you, it was syrupy and dark in the glass, but it tasted brilliantly. Beautiful vineyards, and one of the best things about Wagner is it's right across the lake from us, so you got to see us every day.
You know what? And the crazy thing is I've always wondered what is that building out over there, because I wasn't really familiar with all the different wineries in the area. I was taking these baby steps into the wine industry, and but yeah, when I was at Wagner, John and Deb Wagner were absolutely fantastic at just answering any questions I have, and really just encouraging me to learn as much as possible and giving me the opportunity to.
In a lot of ways, they define what I think makes the Finger Lakes great. You go to wine regions around the country, and oftentimes, the winery owner is perched on a hill. They're rarely in the cellar unless, they're giving some wine writer a tour. I mean, John is in the vineyard every day. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything but a flannel. His hands are always dirty. It just speaks to the work ethic. And I mean, their farming practices are great. It's a really great place to build a firm foundation in the Finger Lakes.
Absolutely. I mean, I every time I've seen him, he is just coming out of the field. I actually don't think I've ever seen him in the office before.
Yeah. Now, just hearing some of the background of the jobs you had, it was definitely focused on building. It was focused on working with your hands, some sort of manufacturing. When you thought about the wine industry, was that part of the calculation? Or was it a kind of a short-term stopgap?
Honestly, when I first joined the wine industry, I just wanted something totally new. I love working with my hands. I love, seeing the product being made, and at the very end, seeing that product in it and its final glory. And when I first joined the wine industry, it really was a temporary thing. Yeah. But then I found this thirst for knowledge for wine, and started getting more involved with the industry in the local area, and it was fantastic. It was nothing like I've ever seen before. You have different wineries in this area, literally just working with each other. I mean, manufacturing field, you're not helping out another manufacturing company. You're in competition.
Yeah.
Up here, you have this culture that's centered around the wine industry, where everyone's helping each other out, and there is no secrets. And, that kind of really just also helped me getting into the wine industry and keep questing for more knowledge.
It is a very rising tides rises all boats mentality.
Absolutely.
Now, when you first came to work with us, and I'm sorry, I actually don't know this, is your brother identical or fraternal?
My twin brother is identical. We are supposedly spitting image. I don't see it, but everyone else does.
You're the more handsome one, right?
That's what I keep saying.
I remember you mentioned he was getting into doing some cider making.
Well, my father wanted to do some cider making. My twin, he's always wanted to kind of do stuff like that, but with a kid now, he doesn't have time for that.
Yeah. How was that growing up with an identical twin?
It was fantastic. I was never the most popular kid in school whatsoever. I mean, with the last name Butts, you have quite a bit of a hard time going through the grades. But you always had this friend to play with. I mean, we've always had this connection where no matter what is going on in our lives, we can always help each other out and cheer each other up. I mean, he's my best cheerleader, and vice versa as well. And we still share that connection today. Him and I will have probably about 4 or 5 conversations, about 5 minutes each, but, continually just have this each and every day. Yeah. We've always had that since we were a little kid. I don't think there was ever a time in my life that I didn't have him to kind of turn to. And we've just kind of kept that going.
Does he like wine?
He does. He's not into it as much as I am. He used to be into red wines, dark, dry red wines. And then he moved back to Rhode Island, and then he started getting into the sweets.
Interesting. It doesn't usually work that way.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But I think it's also the influence of his significant other at the moment, too.
And only because you brought it up, I mean, that had to be hard. When you're an 8-year-old kid, life is hard as a kid, especially in middle school. I got picked on all the time. I was called Lobes. I had big earlobes, Elvis, whatever. But I mean, psychologically, do you think, did that shape you? Was that one of the reasons you think you might not have been as good of a student, or did you just not feel like studying?
Especially with the last name Butts and everything, for the longest time, it really did kind of affect me, especially with the teasing and the bullying and everything. But I had someone with me enduring it just as much as myself. But my childhood was a little bit on the rougher end, so that also mainly contributed to why I didn't pursue a higher education. I mean, we were definitely on lower income, and so getting the money and the financial aid to do that, it really wasn't really in the cards for me. And that's why I went straight into the job force, because I've always had a job since, my father being a farmer, and we always did chores and everything. But an official job, I probably started right at 16 when I was legally allowed to.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, growing up, neither of my parents went to college. And I went to a state school in California, and it was the same sort of calculation. It was I could pay for the tuition working during the semester, but I still got some student aid. And with that, you just have no idea where to even start.
Right.
It's and the paperwork seems so daunting. Now, with that, you are now in college, right?
Yeah. I finally decided to pull the plug and attend FLCC, Finger Lakes Community College, for their viticulture and winemaking program.
Yep.
I just started this previous spring because, I've been working at Belangelo's for so long now that, the Missick family have been fantastic with kind of giving me every opportunity to see all the different facets in the wine industry and what it takes to run a winery. I started off at the tasting room. I started off in managing the tasting room, doing outside sales. I often just tell people, I'm just a jack of all trades, master at none kind of thing, and I'm their Johnny on the spot. Whatever they need done, just let me know. And until recently, I've kind of missed working with my hands. I've kind of missed working with the products that I'm selling. So I decided it's a good time just to finally get that higher education. I learn best by doing, but I realized, while starting, in the harvest, I really got to, pay attention to the chemistry.
Yep.
And I haven't been in an academic setting in 13 years. So trying to get into this, it's a big step.
Yeah.
Just the paperwork and trying to figure out, am I vaccinated for this, and where's my vaccination records, and applying and trying to figure out getting all the paperwork for it. It was a little bit of a daunting task, but now that I'm through, I'm pretty happy with it and kind of getting into the flow of things now.
Yep. 2020 was an awful year in a lot of ways. I mean, for tons of people, many people more than it was for me. And there were a lot of changes that happened in our cellar, and people grow and new things open up. And that was an opportunity for you to then kind of come into the cellar. So with 2020 being difficult, our harvest was lighter, but you still were right there through the harvest. What was going through your head that first harvest experience? Were you overwhelmed? Were you excited? Was it a growth period?
I was super excited. I don't think I was really overwhelmed at all. Besides, I've been working upstairs in the front end of house per se for the winery for so long that I've created the confidence.
Yeah.
But now that I'm, was working downstairs in the cellar, I don't have that confidence. So there was a little bit of frustration for the lack of knowledge, that learning curve that everyone's going to go through. But I absolutely super excited. I mean, when we started bringing in the first, the first ton of grapes, I'm like, you know what? This is where it's at. Yeah. It's not glamorous. It's not clean. You are dirty. You are constantly soaking wet. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? This is fantastic.
Yeah. It feels good. So when you decided to go to school, you did that before you started the harvest, or was that sort of a mutual decision?
That was a mutual decision. They kind of played off each other in aspects of, with 2020, with the pandemic, it really just kind of showed that, it gave me time to kind of reflect on what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And what is my next step, because I'm always looking to kind of find that next step. And with, the lighter harvest that we wound up doing and the opportunity for harvest, it just kind of confirmed that, now's the time to get into winemaking. Now's the time to, take the year or so into the classes, get that strong foundation of what I need and kind of progress from there.
Yep. And I will add, it's interesting because there are really fancy degrees you can get in winemaking. UC Davis, Cornell, they've got full programs. But I'm like you. I learned by doing. And the Finger Lakes Viticulture School is really second to none. And I mean, the facility there, you've done a tour, they've got all of these jacketed, like 30-gallon tanks. I mean, it's amazing. I wish I had all of that just for all of the crazy experiments we do in the cellar.
Absolutely.
And Paul Brock's done a really good job of building what I think is a second to none, really craft education program. I was thrilled when you told me that you had signed up. I had been through a bunch of the classes myself, and I just think what a valuable resource our region has. And what's been interesting to me is to see that, there's a lot of people who go through that program. There's a lot of people who then go other places. Mm-hmm. People have done harvests in New Zealand, in Australia, in Oregon, California. And what I love about that is it's helping to spread the word of the Finger Lakes, because you've got people who learned to love wine here now going throughout the world. They're sort of like our evangelists.
Right. No, absolutely.
But they're picking up all this other knowledge and information and bringing it back.
The Finger Lakes region, and the main reason why I stuck to the region is because the Finger Lakes region, to me, especially growing up in Rhode Island, it became that other place. And the region around this area has such a growth happening right now, almost an evolution in the wine industry with this local area, and everybody's a part of it. It's kind of like the place to be on the East Coast if you want to get into wines. And, at FLCC it's right there. I learned by working with my hands the best.
Yep.
And with that, I figured, you know what? I'm just going to take the certification course, get the meat and potatoes of, that more theoretical part that I'd be missing.
Yep.
And applying it to my everyday work at the Cellar for us.
And, and that was one of the first things I talked with you about. In the world of winemaking, you've got so many different philosophies. And there are winemakers that are scientific winemakers. They go by the book. Calculations can be made without even tasting wine, I imagine, for some of them. And then you've got some who disregard anything that has to do with math.
Right, yeah.
Blending's about the only math they'll do. In our cellar, I tend to take the position of I want as much data as possible, but it won't necessarily create the decisions for us. With that said, taking chemistry is one of those things that helped me so much in terms of how you think about how compounds work together. I'm really glad to see you're doing that. I'm not great at math, but I'm here to help any step along the way. I want to circle back to one thing you said that I found interesting, that the Finger Lakes was that other place. Does it feel like home now?
It absolutely. I don't think at this point in time in my life, I will probably never leave this place, and I will be happy for it. Yeah. I've traveled around. After my divorce, New York wasn't the first stop. I kind of did some couch surfing here and there in different states. I was just meeting new people and checking out the different sceneries. And but when I came to the Finger Lakes, it just has such a impactful feel to it. Everyone works together. Everyone tries to drink and eat local, and everyone pays attention to where everything is coming from. It's definitely became a new slate to me, in my life, that it is that other place to me, but it's probably the place I'll stay.
I think that's an interesting point. We're not from here. My mom was originally from Rochester, about an hour and a half away. But I was born and bred in California, and I grew up a little period of time back here. But I'm with you. There is magic to that other place, and there is something that happens when you feel like you are where you're supposed to be. I think that's one of the things that is infectious in the Finger Lakes. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why people pay so much attention to where their food is coming from. There is the economic impact. We want to help our neighbors. But when you're in a place that's special, you want to make everything about that place special to you.
Oh, absolutely.
So then who makes your favorite cheese in the Finger Lakes?
Oh, you had to put me on the spot. To me, it's kind of like saying, who makes your favorite wine? You know, and I get that question all the time.
Besides us.
Obviously besides us. But it really depends on the context in which I'm eating it. The situation in which I'm eating it in. I love Marina Gisco. Yeah. That dilly girl is on point. But there's a lot of great cheeseries or creameries out there that every place has something that I like, and I kind of have a hard time figuring out which one is my actual favorite.
Yeah, it is interesting because we've got it's such a growing sort of sub industry, and it works so great with wine, which is what I love about it. We've got a small creamery down the road from us, Steyburn.
Oh yeah,
they make largely cheddars. I had never had cheese curds until I moved to the Finger Lakes.
Oh, you've been missing out.
I mean, and my goodness, how great those were. And what it meant was I'd also never had good poutine until I came to the Finger Lakes.
Well, what? The Canadians have something right,
They do. So, when you were in the tasting room, I think we've done a great job over the years. COVID-19 forced our hand in something that we had actually been wanting to do for a while, but we weren't sure what the customer reception would be. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. With with COVID-19, and obviously absolutely tragic, but with all things in life, you got to look at everything with that glass half full. And we have all talked about for years trying to give that more immersive experience, the higher end experience. For the longest time, the Finger Lakes have been that cookie cutter, belly up to the bar, ass to elbow, can't really move around. Here's your wine, here's the next, grab some wine and get out. Yeah. But when a customer really appreciates the wine that they are drinking, sitting there, savoring it and enjoying it, and also getting that little bit of information from vine to wine, the customers not only will buy your wine, but they become invested in your story and invested in your tasting room. I mean, there is 60 some odd wineries around Seneca Lake at the moment right now. Yep. And what's going to distinguish us from the person down the road? The wines are always going to taste different due to the winemakers, but it's that experience that we give. So with COVID-19, it was that perfect opportunity to just, let's, rejuvenate what we're doing. Let's revolutionize our tasting room. Let's go to seated tastings. And with seating tastings, it's a little bit more relaxed, takes a little longer, but people can thoroughly enjoy the wines at a slower rate and pace, at their own pace. I mean, you can make it they can do their tasting as quick as they want. But more often than not, people wind up just taking their time and really enjoying the wine. And I feel like our sales for direct to consumer has really kind of, gone up even with COVID, just because we're giving that experience.
Yep. I mean, it was devastating on the wholesale front.
Oh, absolutely.
We've had a hard time with that, but you're right. When we were able to give the customer what we felt warranted the experience we were trying to offer, I mean, it's been an amazing experience to go through that on this end, and that's prompting all kinds of changes in our tasting room. I mean, coming up.
Oh yeah,
we plan on opening a gallery again, something we wanted to do for years, but that model of the tasting room basically being a pub crawl, but with wine. It was something none of us liked. And it's been so nice to move away from that. We have one thing that we do that's fun. We start all of our tastings with sparkling wine. And you've been a right-hand person in one of the features we do when we saber. So
right.
Talk about that and what makes our sabering a little bit different than some high-end snooty sort of.
Well, at least in the tasting room, I mean, we have this beautiful view outside and inside, and it might seem like a very upscale, ambiance per se, but we give it that non-pinky up experience. And I think that really helps out with, like, when we do saber a wine, sabering is a term for sabrage, and which came from Napoleon region, Napoleon era of France, specifically when a lot of the cavalry units would be on horseback with the bottles of wine that they would steal from, the chateaus and everything. And, how do they get that open? They don't carry around a corkscrew. So they would take their cavalry sabers and they would just nick off the top of the bottle. And that's something that we've been doing for, like personalized experiences, because it gives you that wow factor, and also it's a great learning opportunity for customers for, when they are having their own little gatherings or social gatherings at 10 people or less. But when they are doing a lot of these things, it gives you that wow factor of like, okay, we're going to be enjoying this, something just magical happened.
And I think we had a tour on Friday and I was sabering a bottle for those customers. And, when we started doing this, it was, this is something fun to do. and our savoring sort of stayed around, but it's not fancy. I mean, there's no ivory handles. There's nothing like that. It's the machete I used to clear brush.
Yeah.
That ended up getting cleaned up and left in the kitchen one day. So.
Not for nothing. That thing is pretty intimidating.
It is. It is. So we have a wine in front of us. We have our Forward Dark Red blend. It's been teasing me because I have wine in my glass. You don't have any wine in your glass yet, so feel free to pour some.
All right.
So this is it's an interesting wine because it was a concept wine. So often, the wines we're making, the idea is there are two points that I care about: authenticity and deliciousness. Authenticity in that we don't fabricate and do too much of the winemaker type stuff. We try and have these vineyards speak. But there were a couple of years ago, I realized some people don't always like the lighter color that we have on some of our reds. These are cold climate reds or cooler climate reds. And I thought, what could we do that both respected the history of the region and put together a really dark red? So I'll let you take it from there if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, the forward red, I mean, the forward preludes to the forward of a book. Every main story, every main plot has a building foundation to it. And if you take today's wine region as a whole, our building foundation were these, French-American hybrid grapes being, designed in the 1800s. Mm-hmm. Today, a lot of these grapes that are in this blend, they're kind of lost in time. They're used as just barrel toppers or just some added coloring in some of the blends. Whereas, we wanted to pay homage to our original winemakers here and these growers here and make a blend out of nothing but these hybrid grapes. The Forward Red is probably my favorite right now, honestly. I am all about a wine that I can just open up any other day. Just come home from work. I'm tired of talking to people. I'm tired of, putting on the show per se. Yeah. And just have a glass of wine to decompress and enjoy no matter what I throw at it. I mean, I've paired this with... I've paired it with steak. I've paired it with pasta. I've paired it with seafood. But shoot, I've actually had this with Taco Bell. Yeah, and it was fantastic. So I am all about a wine that I can enjoy no matter what I throw at it. Yeah. But this wine to me also it's something different than in the Finger Lakes. Not only because of that beautiful color that you see there, but the structure and the weight on the palate is thoroughly enjoyable. And then the nose on this, it's not hot whatsoever. And the fruits really start popping out in there, and it'll stay like this for 5-10 minutes, even after just sitting in the glass without even touching it.
Well, I was smelling it the whole time we were talking. So right now there are 5 grapes that we're using in here. It's Chamberson, it's Maréchal Foch, it's Deschanec, Marquette, and with the 19 vintage, we brought some Baco Noir. When I've talked with winemakers in California who have no experience with hybrids, like, this is a foreign language to them. What are these grapes? They can be funky, they can have higher acids. They can ripen pretty well, but it's a totally different balance. And so that's what we did was we spent some years really just kind of fine tuning what grapes would work well together. Could we accentuate some of the cherry from Chamberson while still pulling in this wild meatiness of the Foch. And I agree with you. I really like it, and it's interesting because for years and years, we had a best-selling wine, and the day that we introduced this, from that day forward, it has been the best-selling wine every single month.
Absolutely. And I feel like with a lot of these hybrid grapes, a lot of the different regions kind of really frown upon them. By themselves, they can be a little thin. They can wind up giving you some great attribute, but then leave something to be desired. But also that acidity. Yeah. And we are in obviously a cooler climate, so we're getting quite a bit of the acidity naturally in almost every grape that we grow up here. So we have the tools in our toolkit as winemakers to be able to correct some of the issues, or, create something where it is actually just delicious.
One of the things, 2 points, you bring up hybrid grapes. I have been seeing more and more articles about hybrids being the future for a lot of folks. When we think about it, these grapes grow great in all different kinds of weather. Sometimes they are more disease resistant. They are a more sustainable approach to viticulture in a lot of ways. There are less inputs. And so not only do they grow well, but they have less of an environmental impact, which is something I really like. The other thing that I think helps us here is, it's not a secret, the vineyard that we use. Randy is farming this now. He's getting up there in age, but he's farming grapes his dad planted. These are 40, 50-year-old vines in some instances. And what I've seen is that even with hybrids, vine age really can matter. I mean, it does matter. We get more concentration. So all of these things sort of come together to make what I think is a really compelling hybrid varietal wine. And it's funny because, the majority of what we make is vinifera still.
Yeah.
And we love that, and we're proud of it. But I do take particular pride in being able to take these old grapes. Most of them are old. Marquette's fairly new, but make something compelling from it. So,
I feel like in the wine industry, there's been this big trend of highlighting hybrid grapes, and it's kind of like this new frontier per se, even though these grapes are, designed pretty old,
yeah, a lot more.
And I think it's pretty exciting to see more and more varietal hybrid wines out there. I think people are really starting to kind of break the boundaries per se, and start experimenting more with not only just vinifera grapes, but these hybrid grapes that grow fantastically in these different, growing regions.
So 2 final things. We make a lot of sparkling wine. We'll be disgorging this week some of our 2017 Brut Chardonnay. What do you think about sparkling wine? And then the second part, is there something you're really excited about making this year?
So with the sparkling wine, I love the process of it. I mean, it is, especially for traditional method champenois, it's so hands-on, and it's a bit of a, not just a hands-on aspect, but also kind of like a standoff kind of technique as well, because we make the space, and we get the fermentation going on in the bottles, but then we just, leave it in triage for quite a bit, letting autolysis do its work. But then you got to go through the whole process of disgorging. Is just, there's so many different steps to these wines that really create something special. And I feel like a lot of consumers don't realize the difference, or how much work goes into that bottle of wine that they're enjoying with their dinner. And we are in a region that is perfect for champenoise. I mean, we have the acidity, and I don't know why a lot of people aren't doing a lot of sparkling.
It's growing.
Mm-hmm.
It's growing. I agree. I think part of it is it's an investment in time. Yeah, you buy the glass in one vintage and you just sit on it for 4 or 5. We're going to be disgorging some 2014, so it's almost 7 years. But it is, to me, I'm with you. It's rewarding. And, we have a real DIY setup. I know I've put YouTube videos out in the past. We'll be doing more. Everything is labor intensive. But I'll tell you, nothing, there are 2 parts actually to winemaking that connect me to what I think is great about this position, this occupation. It is a connection to history and legacy, and knowing that in some ways what you're doing now was done pretty close to the same way, and some minor tweaks and improvements 200 years ago. That's doing some vineyard work and then sparkling wine. So every time, my hands are cold, I'm tired, but I really take pride in that.
Oh yeah, and it's winemaking. One thing that I absolutely love about winemaking is that we aren't making the wheel. We're not recreating the wheel here. We're refining it. We're smoothing out some of the edges, making things roll a little better, but we're not recreating the process. So a lot of what we're doing, people were doing hundreds of years ago, if not, if you think about thousands of years ago. And when it comes to sparkling wine, I do love sparkling wine. Sometimes the carbonation on my own personal palate, I feel like dissipates some of the flavors. But if you get a really well aged sparkling traditional method Champenois, where the bubbles are so petite and fine, you get this bready sourdough texture, that is one of my favorites. That 2014 Brut that we're going to be disgorging, just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I don't think I've ever tasted one like that here in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And so the second part, what projects are you interested in doing winemaking wise this year?
For winemaking in the Finger Lakes, I feel like, everyone expects us to make nothing but whites. I love reds.
Yeah.
I love, whether it be hybrid, vinifera. I am really excited for getting down and dirty about the reds.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorites. It's always my go-to are these red wines. And the cool thing about learning winemaking in the Finger Lakes region is that these winemakers, the people that I talk to every day are the MacGyvers of winemakers.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't always have the same region, the same harvest.
Yeah.
The temperatures are always different. It goes from one extreme to the next, but you get these winemakers that have such a drive and passion that they make some of the best wines in the United States, if not around the world. And when it comes to red wines, to make a really great red wine, I mean, you really have to know what you're doing. So that's one thing I'm extremely excited about because, you make fantastic reds. I mean, there's other wineries around the Finger Lakes that do a great job as well. But there's a texture and quality to a lot of the reds that we produce that you don't see, and it's super exciting to be involved with that.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up the kind of the vintage variation. So John Williams, who's one of the owners and winemaker at Frog's Leap, I mean, storied, fantastic Napa winery, did some of his most early winemaking here in the Finger Lakes at Glenora.
Mm-hmm.
I think mid 70s he was there. And I think it was a podcast or something I heard him mention one time, in Napa and California, 3, maybe 4 out of 5 vintages are really good. In the Finger Lakes, you throw all that out because every year possesses its own challenges that you do have to find ways to overcome while still making authentic wines.
Yeah.
So,
and I feel like that as of late, a lot of the quality in the Finger Lakes region is starting to really become fantastic. And I think that's another reason why we're finally being recognized as a truly great wine region. Because, we have seasons that are totally different from another. We have all of these different extremes, and we're babies compared to the wine regions around the world.
Yeah.
So we're finally starting to get this historical data, this little bit of a foundation of experience now. And now that we have this records per se, we're able to kind of act accordingly now.
Yeah.
And you can really taste that, and it's always expressed in the wine.
On a personal note, when we're working sometimes and kind of doing our own tasks, we both love listening to audiobooks. I know you're a sci-fi buff.
Oh, so I love high fantasy.
What are you listening to now or reading?
I am currently rereading, listening to the Wheel of Time series. And the Wheel of Time series is kind of like the building foundation for any of the fantasy books that are out and about right now. But in a wine sense, I have been not really reading, but listening to a lot of the different podcasts out there right now.
Yeah. we didn't mention the fact that you have a hobby as a blacksmith.
Yeah, I do. I did.
And
Not right now. It's a little cold, but
you do your own blacksmithing. I have this guilty pleasure of Ren fairs.
mm-hmm.
And, you know, some of the stuff you've made looks like you could be one of the top selling arts and crafts folks at Ren fairs. It's pretty neat, though. How did you get into that?
You know, with blacksmithing, I just decided to kind of pick it up one day. I think I was watching like Forge and Fire on the History Channel. But you know, obviously being a fantasy, you know, nerd, going to a lot of like the Renaissance festivals, you see this, and it's always kind of been a something of interest to me. I remember when my father brought me down to Colonial Williamsburg when I was younger, and you would go through the historic districts, and there was the blacksmith shop that we stopped by next, and I thought, oh man, you're literally taking this steel, you know, stuff that typically you don't want moving, typically you don't want bending, and you're literally molding it to what you want. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I went to the University of YouTube and, you know, saw how people were making forges and everything is all self-taught. Besides, I did do a couple classes at, I think it's Rochester Arc, where they have a few tutorials as well.
Yeah.
And when it's nice out and I'm not freezing like today, or it's like 6 degrees out, you know, I love just kind of swinging away at the hammer. It's pretty relaxing.
Yeah, it is. And for anybody listening or watching, you're right. It's 6, not 60, not even 16. It is 6 degrees, and it's almost lunchtime.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, well, I really appreciate you sitting down, Matt. Thanks for all the work you put in at the winery. I hope you enjoyed this show. This has been Viticulture, where we share ways to cultivate a good life. Don't forget to visit our website at viticulturepodcast.com. Subscribe to our Substack, where you'll get show notes, transcripts, musings, and exclusive offers. And check us out on all the major social media platforms. Thanks again for stopping by.